Welcome, listeners, to Nintenno Podcast. Right now, I'm sitting in around 120 hours in the game. I don't know where you are, but if you've been playing along with this podcast from the start and you've been putting in at least a few hours a week, I can imagine that you've had this feeling at least once. Now what? Warframe is a massive game full of stupid amounts of content. There's always new stuff to do and unlock, even literally thousands of hours in. This is obviously a great thing, but it can also cause a very specific problem for players. When every activity you do has an endless pool of unlocks associated with it, it can be really easy to grind just one or two of those activities forever until you get bored. Maybe like me, you're a little too motivated to do alerts, and you're getting just a bit tired of racking up credits and random rewards. Maybe you're super motivated to unlock the star chart or do story missions, and you're starting to feel like you're just working through a checklist. Whatever it may be, if you play any game for dozens of hours, there will be a point where you start to stagnate and you wonder, what now? So if you and your Warframe used to be madly in love and now the honeymoon is coming to an end, I've got 5 recommendations today to help you spice up your relationship. Let's get started with the next episode of Nintenno Podcast. So today, like I said, I've got 5 pieces of advice that I think will help you if you've gotten into a rut in Warframe. First things first, pick a weapon that's 1 or 2 MR higher than what you currently are and grind that affinity as fast as you can. Now, I don't know if you're somebody who's already been grinding MR or weapon levels. If you already are, this maybe is a little bit different than your normal practice. If you're like me, what you do is you equip low-level stuff, and then you pick a reasonably easy mission that you can get a lot of kills in, and you just blaze through it as quick as you can. That's how I've been doing it. Or maybe I'll take my frame on a story mission or something along those lines. Now, those can be decent ways to progress your MR over time, but they're not particularly fast. For me right now, I have both the Lex Prime and the Bratton Prime, and they are ready to craft. They're both MR8 weapons. They're the first primes I've ever crafted, so I'm super excited, but I am MR7. In fact, I just hit MR7. I know I'm really going to like both of these guns, so I am extremely motivated to push my MR higher. Here's what I did, and here's what I'm going to recommend you to do. I don't know where you are in the star chart, but once you get to Saturn, you're going to unlock a mission on Helene Saturn. Here's how I recommend a great way for you, especially if you're earlier in the game like I am, which still is funny to say 120 hours in, but it's true. If you're earlier in the game and you have access to Saturn, here's what you're going to do. I'm going to recommend, although it's not necessary, that you buy an affinity booster. There's a couple ways that you can get this. If you don't want to buy it, you could always just hope to get lucky. Yesterday, for example, I got, as my daily login bonus, I got a 5-hour affinity booster, and I got really lucky because the whole family was watching TV. I didn't really care about what was on. I had just gotten home when I got this 5-hour affinity booster, so basically I had all evening for free with boosted affinity. So that's one way to do it, but that's really random. You don't want to plan on that because you can't control it. A great way to do this, though, is for you just to fork out cash, buy 70 platinum for $5, and then use 40 of it to buy a 3-day affinity booster. That's a good way to do it. Another way, though, that you can do it pretty easily, if you've been playing the game a lot and you've gotten some good mod drops, just go on ahead and trade some stuff. Get on trading, sell out to try to get some platinum, and then use that platinum to buy an affinity booster. But again, this is optional. It is a timed item that will double the affinity that you get. So if you're going to do this, I highly recommend having one, but it's not necessary. Run Helene Saturn with a team. Now, make sure that you've equipped gear that is really low leveled or maybe even entirely unleveled. If you're a decent MR, like right now I'm MR7, so I've got a little bit of mod capacity extra than what you would have if you're, say, 2 or 3 MR. So go on ahead and craft or equip a couple of mods rather that will give you a lot of damage or a lot of survivability on your frame. But make sure you're picking stuff with low affinity. If you're not, you're wasting your time. Then jump into Helene, run the team. Make sure you stick around until at least wave 15, because then you're going to get really high amounts of enemies coming through. You're going to get a lot of affinity for your kills, and it's going to be awesome. Now, I was really frustrated with my slow progress on my MR for a couple of reasons. First things first, I had been doing a lot of story progression and unlocking the star chart, and when I did those, I found that around Saturn, even a little bit at the end of Jupiter, I was getting my butt kicked if I wasn't using kind of max out stuff. So it's level 30, maybe with a catalyst or a reactor applied. I was really struggling at those missions. So I was defaulting to using my Excalibur with all level 30 stuff, which means I was gaining no MR on those missions. Also, because of the timed events that were coming up with things like the Acolytes mission, I needed that kit to be able to deal a lot of damage. I wanted to be able to help out my team in those tough fights with those Acolytes. So, again, probably only half of my playtime was I actually progressing my MR. So I was stuck. I had some gear that was kind of mid-leveled, maybe 20 was probably about as high as any of my gear was. I jumped in and I did 25 minutes in a run of Helene. We got up to wave 15 before we backed out, and I gained 20 gear levels in 25 minutes. And that was with stuff that's at higher levels. If you come in entirely unleveled, you're going to level up way faster than that because it takes less XP to hit the next level, or affinity rather. So jump in with unleveled stuff if entirely possible. Your team probably is going to have to carry you to an extent, but do your best to dish out some damage and grind out that MR as fast as you can. It's so fulfilling when you hit those higher MR levels and you're able to get new gear that you didn't have access to before. Plus, it's just a really quick boost to your power to get a brand new weapon that's a higher tier. It's pretty nice. So try that. If you haven't done it before, if you haven't done an intense strategic affinity grind, try it. But make sure that you pick that target gear that's a couple MRs higher, so that way you're truly motivated to burn through those missions. My next tip, revisit an old frame. Now, this may be obvious, but hear me out. There's some reasons I'm saying this. When I try something new in Warframe, I typically level it up a couple times. Maybe I hit level 10 or level 15, and then I decide whether I want to keep going or I want to swap to something new. Now, that's okay with weapons, but with Warframes, they're a little bit different. First of all, Warframes are a little harder to get than weapons are, and they take longer to craft, so you've got a higher investment in your Warframes. There are fewer Warframes than weapons, so you're not going to quickly run through Warframes as you did before. But also, here's another trick. Weapons don't change as they level up, but Warframes do. They don't unlock their full potential until they hit level 30. So an ability you disliked is going to be innately better at level 30. Oberon, for me, is a great example of this. You can get him pretty easily, pretty early on, and so he was one of the first frames that I crafted. He's a great example. I disliked him at the start because I don't use pets, so his special ability, or his passive rather, seemed kind of useless to me, and I thought his first ability, Smite, was trash. But now, at level 30 and with proper mods, I love Smite. Right now, what I'm running with Oberon is the shotgun Heck. And then I'm running, I believe it's called Sestra as my secondary. Sestra is basically like a pistol minigun. It's kind of cool, but it's ridiculously inaccurate at long range. And the Heck is just not great at long range either because there's too much spread. So I love using my Smite as a longer range kill option on weaker enemies. If somebody's around a corner and I don't want to have to just pepper him with a bunch of shotgun blasts or try to hit him with that stupid minigun, then I just pop up, hit the Smite, and I can sometimes take out multiple lower level enemies with that one ability. So that's an ability that I hated early on, but now I found that I liked now that it's at level 30 and got a decent mod on it. Also, some abilities just take practice to understand their ability and their potential. Again, Oberon is a great example here. His second ability, Hallowed Ground, it's obviously an AoE that you can use to good effect next to a target in defense missions. I mean, that's like the most obvious thing. It's something that you plop on the ground that deals damage over time to an area. So, of course, you can put it down next to the cryopod and help with defense. But a slightly less obvious feature is that you can create a nice funnel of death by throwing this ability in a door frame or on a ramp. The enemies make no effort to avoid this space, so if you throw down this ability in a door frame that enemies are spawning and coming through, you're going to mow down a bunch of people with almost no effort. Then here actually is a nice pro strat that I found with that same ability that'll help illustrate my point. Yesterday, I soloed a mission that was probably just a couple levels above comfortable. It wasn't too hard. I could handle it, but I definitely couldn't shut off my brain and just autopilot through the mission. Well, at one point, I had really low health, and I had an Eximus with a shield on the ground below me, and I was above his head on the platform. I discovered that by peeking over the edge, I could drop hallowed ground onto the floor below me without exposing myself to his attacks. Then, by quickly bullet jumping down and back up, I could bait him into crossing into this ability's area of effect multiple times. By the time the ability wore off, all I needed to do was drop into his bubble and hit him with a single shotgun blast to finish him off. I took almost no damage, which was good because I couldn't afford to take any damage. And I took out a strong Eximus with a shield without much difficulty just by using this ability creatively. So here's what I would recommend. When you grind MR on Helene, don't take a frame that you like. Take something that's a frame that you don't like and haven't used and boost it up to 30. Then take that frame out on an easier mission and just mess around with its abilities. You might be surprised at the potential of that frame. For me now, Oberon is actually one of my new favorite frames because he's so versatile. He's got multiple direct damage abilities. He's got this area of effect over time damaging ability. He can heal in multiple ways. Oberon rocks, and I had no idea because I hadn't tested him out. Now, don't hold. I'm not proposing that Oberon is like an S tier. I have no idea what his ranking is. He may be trash in high levels, but especially for where I am right now, he's great. And my point is, you may be surprised with something you didn't like just by revisiting an old frame. Suggestion number 3 for spicing up your Warframe love life is to run some standard Void missions for the treasure. Now, we all know about Void Relics because we talked about those in my 100-hour podcast. If you aren't doing Void Relics, you should get into those Void Fissures, crack some relics, get some gear. But when I play a Void Relic mission, I always roll with a team. We always rush through really quickly to get the sick loot. I really enjoy the old school Zelda mentality of cutting every blade of grass and smashing every pot. So here's what I recommend. Go to the Void on the star chart and choose a mission. Now, again, these are not the same as Void Fissures. Void Fissures pop up in that alerts section. Void missions are just on the star chart in the Void. Equip some decent gear, and then go on a full-out clearing run. Here's why you should do it and what you're going to get. First things first, you're going to get a bunch of credits when you do this. There's money everywhere. There's tons of enemies to kill, and there's money everywhere. Obviously, you're going to gain affinity as well, but you're going to get credits. You're also going to get some nice mods. I did a clearing run earlier, and what I'm saying by that is basically I explored the whole map and just busted everything, opened everything. I got 2 gold mods plus a brand new mod that I hadn't seen before. So Void missions are a good way, at least in my experience, to get mods. There's Argon crystals. These are a rare resource that you need for certain gear, and they can only be found in the Void. And then also there's just really cool level design and traps. This is actually my favorite reason to go to the Void, is that it doesn't look like anywhere else. And it's just cool to see. There's this gold crap everywhere. It's cool looking. Plus you're going to find like pressure traps that pop out lasers. You're going to jump into other areas where there's like a laser grid that you have to dodge in and out of. You're going to find places that are kind of like Maru's treasure hunts, where you have a certain amount of time that you need to blitz through something in order to be able to get the reward at the end. So it's really cool. They feel different from other missions, and there's decent rewards when you fully clear them. So tip number 3, run some Void missions and get some treasure. Tip number 4, team up and try a defense mission that's way too hard for you. Now, don't be crappy and hide in the corner. This sucks for your team. Don't do that. And you're honestly not going to get great rewards from doing this anyway. Here's what to do, in my opinion. First things first, pick your strongest primary, catalyst it, mod it well, maybe even put on a forma. Make sure you have one real good gun. And or pick a powerful ability. I highly recommend Excalibur's Exalted Blade. Whatever you pick, mod your frame for energy pool and for efficiency to make sure that you can use that ability as well as possible and you can use it for as long as possible. Jump into the mission with the team. Now, stick to your other equipment, not your crazy high-level stuff. Stick to your weaker stuff for as long as you can. Force yourself to keep that weaker stuff out until it just becomes either completely ineffective or until you're running the risk of dying a whole bunch. Because the more you die, the less affinity you're going to get. So don't do that. Also, you want to be able to help your team as much as you can. Here's why. I know this sounds kind of obvious, but here's why. This is going to teach you to get better at this game. It's going to teach you how to be adaptable. It's going to force you to get good at bullet jumping. It will make you aware of proper positioning. Like in my example with Oberon earlier, you're going to be forced to use the level to your benefit and position better. It's going to help you aim quickly and accurately. It's going to force you to use your abilities intelligently and efficiently. And more importantly, it's going to force you to practice aiming and shooting while you're in the air. And this is a critical maneuver to master for harder missions. So don't be a crappy teammate. Don't put on weak gear and then just hide in the corner, because that stinks. Don't do that. It's not fun for your team. It's not fun for anybody. Don't do that. But try it out. Try doing some stuff that's too hard for you. You may be surprised at how much fun you have, and also at the sense of accomplishment you feel and the things that you learn when you come out of that mission. Tip number 5. Build some gear by fishing and mining. Now, this is another easy bit of advice, but build a Zaw or build a kit gun. This is really fun to do. It's cool because it adds an extra layer of customization and personalization to the game, which is really neat. It lets you kind of flesh things out the way that you want to. It also gets you out exploring the plains of Eidolon and Orb Valis, and it helps get you familiar with the land. So that's kind of cool in and of itself. It's just that it's forcing you out into Fortuna and into the plains. But there's more to it. Building these Zaws and kit guns are going to push you toward mining and fishing and some other activities. Now, we're going to talk more about this in the future, but I hate Arcwing missions. And the reasons I hate Arcwing missions are that they force you to do something that just doesn't feel like Warframe. I don't like to spend a huge chunk of time not bullet jumping and shooting and leveling up my primary gear, because that's the whole reason I play Warframe. To me, it's just a bizarre tangent that, I don't know, like I said, it's pulling me away from the reasons I'm playing. I feel like fishing and mining do a similar thing. They shake up that normal gameplay, but they do it in a much better way. First of all, they don't have a forced objective or a time limit. You can do them at your leisure as you want to. I feel like when I'm doing Arcwing missions, I feel like I'm kind of trapped because they take too long, at least, again, in my opinion. I feel like I'm stuck until I finish them. I always get really frustrated when an alert pops up and I click in without realizing it's an Arcwing mission, and then I'm trapped there. But with fishing and mining, you can go for as long or as short as you want. You can also just take random breaks to blow stuff up whenever you like. Those activities feel really different from the normal gameplay, but in a relaxing way. Arcwing missions just feel stressful to me because I think the aiming and movement, they just feel terrible, in my opinion. But fishing and mining, they let me relax. I can kind of zone out and just do something that's easy. I can watch a show in the background, or I can just say, you know what, I'm just going to take a quick break from shooting stuff for a minute. But more importantly, here's the big one for me. They let you progress in a much more meaningful way. So when you play Arcwing missions, only your Arcwing gear gains affinity, and the things you unlock only make you more powerful in Arcwing missions. So it's not like you'll say, well, I don't like Arcwing missions, but hey, at least I'm leveling up my frame, because you're really not. You're only leveling up Arcwing stuff. If you don't enjoy the activity, there's really no reason to do it at all. But with fishing and mining, you're gaining standing and you're gaining resources that directly impact the main gameplay of Warframe. So as you get standing, I don't know if you know this or not, but as you gain standing, it's similar to kind of somewhere in between affinity and credits and MR, because standing is spent just like money is, but the more you get of it, the higher your standing rank becomes, and much like MR, that unlocks new gear and new things that you can purchase. So the whole time you're fishing and mining, you're gaining standing to buy blueprints for Zaws and get kit guns and other stuff that you're going to use in the normal loop of gameplay for Warframe. And you're getting the crafting materials to make that gear the whole time you're fishing and mining. So to sum it up, fishing and mining are quick, they're easy to do, They offer something different that kind of shakes up the gameplay, and you're still progressing your account in meaningful ways while you're doing them. So to me, it's kind of what I hoped Arcwing missions were going to be when I started, but this actually does it, again, in my opinion, in a good way. You may love Arcwing missions, and we're going to talk about those in a future episode as well, and more of the reasons that I dislike them. You might not like the loop of fishing and mining, but at least you're not trapped in those missions, and the whole time you're doing them, you're making meaningful progression. So these are just a few suggestions, but the reason I'm bringing them up is that, first of all, I don't want you to get stuck in a rut in Warframe. But also I want to point out the fact that this doesn't feel like a diverse game when you first start out. When you begin this game, you're going to think, wow, all I do is pop into a 5 to 10 minute mission, shoot a bunch of stuff, pop out, attach a mod, and repeat. And honestly, yeah, that is the loop of Warframe. That even now, even doing all of this other stuff, that's the goal. You're getting new gear, you're leveling up more gear, and then you're unlocking more gear to do it all over again. That's the whole point. But it's not as simple as that. There's a whole lot more to it. And so I want you to realize Warframe has a lot of ways that you can be having fun, a lot of ways that you can shake it up. And that's the reason people are playing it for hundreds of hours. These are just a few suggestions that got me out of a rut. Hopefully they're helpful to you too. Warframe has a shocking amount of content, and in my opinion, it can be really easy to fall into that trap of mindless grinding, but you don't need to. And the cool thing about it is, pretty much nobody plays PvP. Now, that sounds bad, and honestly it is. I wish that PvP was a more used mode, but here's what I mean by that. In a game like Destiny, I always felt like I needed to be playing and I needed to be grinding because I wanted to keep up with everybody else. Even though the light levels were balanced out and everybody was supposed to be in a more balanced PvP environment, I felt the pressure to get the gun that I didn't have or things like that because I wanted to keep up in PvP. But Warframe's not that way. There really isn't. I mean, there is, but truthfully, there's not PvP. Nobody plays it. I couldn't even get into a match when I tried. So you don't need to feel like you have to keep up with everybody else. You can do it at your pace. So you can say, hey, I had this goal in mind. I was grinding to it. I'm getting a little burnout. Even though I'm not there, I'm going to take a break and grind out a different goal right now and shake up that gameplay. You don't have to feel bad about that. Then when you get tired of the new thing, go back to what you're doing before. You're always going to be progressing and always be moving forward. So when you start to get bored with your current grind, do something else. Grind for something new. Challenge yourself. Try out new gear and new Warframes. Don't be afraid to goof around in Warframe. Now it's time once again for our segment called Gear of the Week. Today's Gear of the Week is Heck. Heck is a powerful shotgun that can be obtained at Mastery Rank 4, meaning that you won't have to do too much grinding to get it. I think one of the reasons that Heck is so popular and talked about so much in Warframe message boards is that its low Mastery Rank requirement means that it's going to be a pretty big power buff that you're going to get early in the game. It's something that you can work towards when you're starting out, it's easily obtainable, and it gives you a lot of power early on. This gun is known for its high damage and for a tight spread, making it effective at much longer ranges than most shotguns. But it's not the best crowd control weapon due to its low rate of fire and its spread. Hex blueprints can be purchased at the market on your ship for 25,000 credits, and it can be crafted for an additional 25,000 credits. In addition to the money, you're going to need 5 neurodes, which can be found all over Earth. Do any mission, just scrounge around for the breakable clusters of neurodes. You need 9,000 circuits, which are found on Venus and Ceres in containers that look just like a desktop computer tower. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, those. And finally, you need 1,200 salvage and 1,100 rubido. These can be farmed by breaking stuff on Mars, Jupiter, and Sedna for salvage, and Earth and Phobos for rubido, as well as some other late-game planets, but those are the two easiest, most accessible places to get it. For modding, Point Blank is an obvious choice. It gives you a straight-up boost to your base damage, which is nice, can never hurt. We talked before on the show about how it's kind of best when you're modding stuff to lean into whatever the strengths of the weapon are. So Heck is already extremely high damage. Go ahead and pack on a little bit more. Blaze is another popular choice. It evenly boosts base damage and heat damage. You can't go wrong with Hell's Chamber, too, which adds extra pellets and thereby extra damage to every shot fired. That's called multi-shot. If multi-shot is not a mechanic that you've looked into much, you should look into it not just for Heck, but for all your weapons. Basically, it just adds extra bullets every time you push the trigger, which of course means extra damage, assuming they hit. Now, another really cool thing, if you want to lean even further into the multi-shot, you can add the Hex specific mod. It's a weapon-specific mod called Scattered Justice. This is a mod that can only be applied to the Heck, and it significantly boosts multi-shot. But it also adds a mechanic called Justice. While Heck is the activated weapon, all affinity gained causes a Justice meter to fill. When that meter fills, Heck basically explodes. It discharges a massive explosion that deals damage to nearby enemies, it heals the player, and it temporarily buffs your armor percentage. So it does a lot of stuff. Yes, I say Heck explodes, but it doesn't destroy the weapon for the rest of the mission or anything. It's just a really cool extra thing that gets added on to an already powerful weapon. For my personal recommendations, again, I'm not a pro, just offering some of my own thoughts. I like to pair slower firing weapons like the Heck with faster weapons to make sure that I'm well-rounded. While I was leveling Heck, I primarily used Sestra and Furus as my sidearms. I don't think either one of those guns are meta, but they both meant that I could quickly swap to my sidearm and pump out damage when the Heck's tiny clip ran out, because believe me, it will. It's only got 4 shots. Also, despite the Heck having impressive range for a shotgun, at the end of the day, it's still just that. It's a shotgun, so it never hurts to pack a sidearm with some good range, or pair the Heck with a Warframe with some ranged abilities. So anyway, that is our gear of the week. If you have access to the Heck, craft it, make it, whip it out, and write into the show. Let me know what you think of the Heck. Thank you guys so much for listening. Don't forget, you can follow us now on YouTube. You can't go to some specific YouTube URL. It's a little long and complicated, but you can go to my sweet bit.ly address that will take you there. It's bit.ly/NintennoPodcast YouTube. You may not realize this, but bit.ly does require you to be case sensitive. So the N and the P are capitalized in Nintenno Podcast, and the Y and the T are capitalized in YouTube. So once again, bit.ly/NintennoPodcast YouTube. I'm going to put that link in the description of this episode. You can follow us there because every week I'm going to be uploading a video version of the podcast. Basically, it's just going to be a bunch of random gameplay of me goofing around. I'm no expert at this game, as you can probably tell from listening to this show, but you can watch me goof around, and then you can mock me in the comments for being bad at this game. But there's more to the channel because some of our experts are beginning to share videos with me that we're uploading into a veteran videos section. I'm going to be starting to do some live streams here and there, so you can actually get on and chat with me if you like, watch me play some games, and I'm even doing some other random games and random videos. Go to YouTube, check it out. I think you'll have a lot of fun. Of course, you can always write into the show at NintennoPodcast@gmail.com, but a better way, a faster way to connect is to go to Facebook.com/NintennoPodcast. Follow us along on there, comment along on our posts, and also that's a great way to keep up with what we're doing on YouTube. Anyway, thanks as always for listening to this show. I hope that you have enjoyed this episode, and I hope that you look forward to our next episode coming next Friday, because I think it's going to have some pretty good stuff inside. I am Evan. I have been your host. Thanks so much for listening, and keep on farming those frames.